Hi, everybody. I'm Brent Stafford, and welcome to our special coverage of the Taxpayers Protection Alliance's Good Cop 2.0, the Tobacco Harm Reduction Counter-Conference to the World Health Organization's COP11. Joining us live from Geneva for our final broadcast at the close of Day 5 of Good Cop 2.0 are David Williams, President at TPA, and Martin Cullip, TPA International Fellow. Gentlemen, wow, can you believe it? It's almost over.
Here we are. It's the end of the week, but not the end of the fight, that's for sure.
Well, do tell, guys. What's been going on the last couple of days? I feel like I'm jet lagged, but I'm not. I haven't flown anywhere, but I'm jet lagged.
Well, yeah, I'm glad we're in our conference, which is much more lighter than some of the stuff they're doing down the road, and they will have been having quite late evenings and discussing things. And it seems like they're having a few hard discussions. They have agreed a decision for agenda item 4.1, which is on the forward-looking measures, but we don't know what that is because they haven't published it yet. They said they discussed, amended, and improved it. So what the amendments are, we just won't know. But with the other four items on the Committee A agenda, 4.2, 4.3, 4 and 5, 4.3 was transferred to Committee B, which shows that they were running out of time in Committee A. So they're having to get Committee B to discuss that on the environment. 4.2 on liability and 4.4 on Articles 9 and 10 were adjourned. So they'll be discussing them today. And the last one, 4.5, which is about the harm reduction. I think they're having problems with them. You read the bulletins, and they were talking about industry posing recycled objections and coming up with tired old things about the hypothetical benefits of harm reduction, apparently, or safer nicotine products. They're pretending that these benefits that don't exist.
Yeah, and Brent, let me just mention that we saw something similar in 2024 in Panama, is that there was confusion, there were delays, and they weren't getting this stuff done on time. And obviously, we don't know what's going on behind closed doors because we're shut out of these meetings. The media is shut out of these meetings. But I suspect that they're getting more pushback, that the WHO is getting more pushback in the extreme measures that they want to pursue. And I say that because if you've heard the opening statements this week, we have more countries pushing back. We have more countries saying some really common sense things. So I'm just wondering if this voice is growing louder within the WHO. And God bless bureaucracy, right? Because if this is slowing the bureaucracy down, this is exactly what we want, because we don't want them doing anything stupid. And if this mucks up the process, that's fantastic. So I think it's interesting. The last two times, the last two COP, including this one, we see this delay, and we see, I don't know the exact word, if it's confusion or chaos, but I think it's good.
Yeah, isn't there a principle, more from our side, is that, gridlock actually can be a good thing because it limits how much damage a government can do?
Yeah, gridlock. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. And yes, we see that in the US when there's gridlock. One party not controlling everything can be a blessing, can also be a curse, but it's mostly a blessing. So yes, I think gridlock is to our advantage right now. And I guess, Martin, there's going to be a press conference tomorrow on Saturday, and a little bit nervous about that, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, they've kind of thrown the kitchen sink at all this. We had a hell of a lot of activity before COP11, and during they had all these side events, trying to gaslight all the delegates into voting against anything to do with harm reduction, or arguing against it anyway. So there's been a lot of activity, and now they're having this press conference tomorrow afternoon about lunchtime, and I think that's fairly unusual. Normally they just have the closing plenary, and then we'll get the report in due course. But we don't know what that's about, and it's led by Andrew Black, who's the head of the FCTC, or acting head of the FCTC Secretariat. So who knows what that might be about.
Right. So that actually portends maybe some damage that could be coming down the pike here for us.
Well, I don't know. They'll probably be just trying to reiterate the same thing. All the bulletins keep saying industry interference, and they make this weird claim in the bulletin this morning to say that everyone who spoke in favour of harm reduction or mentioned harm reduction, it was industry who were orchestrating it. They said it was a strategic, well orchestrated strategy. And the words they used were, they said at the end of this, it said, who was the real maestro behind this symphony of recycled objections? And of course, they're just blaming it all on industry.
Actually, it was Martin Cullip. Martin Cullip was the behind all of this.
Right. So, I mean, so when we point out that almost every single NGO is funded by Bloomberg and they're all coordinated, and, we bring that up and they're, but then when tobacco harm reduction comes up, they're seeing that it's behind, it's like a tobacco industry is behind it. And I just can't understand how they can see it with tobacco industry, but not see it with their own stuff.
And Brent, let's be clear, there's a huge amount of hypocrisy here, because at the climate change COP, you have industry that's a part of the discussion. You have Elon Musk and electric vehicles. You have Ford, Chrysler. You have all these industry folks that are trying to find a solution to climate change, with electric vehicles or other technology. And they are embraced. They are welcome into those meetings, and they talk to them. And listen, Elon Musk, I think the board just approved his $1 trillion salary. I mean, something absolutely outrageous. So these companies are making money off of solving climate change. And I don't have a problem with that at all if they're solving or trying to fix a problem. It's just the World Health Organization, they don't understand that industry may be a part of this solution. As much as they despise the tobacco companies, industry actually may be a part of the solution here.
Yeah, absolutely. Martin, could you do a little predicting for us with regard to what they might, be thinking about when it comes to the tobacco end game?
Well, this is the thing I said right at the start of this conference, that the agenda was very ambitious. I think they're trying to rush things. If I was them, I would be sort of moving at a slower pace, but they seem to be pushing a little bit too hard. And I think that's why we've got many of the statements where we're talking about sovereignty and talking about science-based evidence, and things like that, because I think they're just throwing everything, and any mention of harm reduction, they're trying to say is the industry saying it. That's what 4.5 said. It said the so-called harm reduction. Harm reduction was in inverted commas all the time to try and say this is just an industry thing. But a lot of countries have seen that the products are helping their populations. So many will be saying, well, hold on, it's a bit too much, this. So maybe I think it was them being ambitious. I mean, they could all be wrong, and they might pass all the amendments and then all the decisions made, and that's the end of it. But I don't know. I just think from reading the bulletins this morning and the journal this morning and seeing what workload they have, I think they will have been having a lot of discussion. They would hope to have get through at least more than one agenda item, but they've only passed one so far. So yeah.
And we don't know what that one is.
Yeah, it's 4.1 on forward-looking measures, but we don't know what the amendment is. It's specifically said they've amended the original wording of the draft decision. So they've had an amendment, but they haven't published it. And so until they produce their report or publish that, we don't know what the wording is.
Now, there were a mention in one of the bulletins, it might have been yesterday, talking about the measuring of the contents and emissions of tobacco products and regulating those. Do we know anything about that?
Article 9 and 10, yeah, contents and emissions. And they've been talking about that for years. It's been one of the slowest paced things they've done. They abolished the working group in 2018, which is where any party can join the working group. And they wanted to start an expert group, and all the parties voted against that twice. And they said, oh, there's no appetite to have a working group. Well, no, the majority both times wanted a working group, but they don't want to do that. And now with Article 9 and 10, they're saying they're not even going to have an expert group. They're just going to decide amongst themselves. So they're saying, parties, you just wait. We'll come and tell you what we're going to do later. They can't. Like, the NGOs have now carved the parties out of it, and the whole point of conference of the parties is the parties are meant to make the decisions, but they've cut them out. And they said, we'll just probably talk to their friends like Belgium and Maldives and Australia or something, and then just say, oh, we've drafted this. So that's going to cause trouble, isn't it? You try and say that to a lot of these countries, and they'll think, why are you making decisions without talking to us? Because they're not having any intercessory work at all. There is no working groups at the current moment, so there's nothing that parties can do in between the COP meetings. So that's going to cause trouble, and you're going to walk into a bit of objection for that. So who knows? They might be stuck again on Articles 9 and 10 like they were at COP 10.
Now, the effort that we talked about, prior to COP11, that overall effort to elevate nicotine to be as harmful as tobacco smoke, is that in 9 and 10 or was that elsewhere?
That's across their whole approach, really. They just want to cast everything as harmful. The wording they use, like I said earlier, they say some of these countries are coming out with industry arguments about hypothetical benefits of harm reduction. I mean, that's just saying we reject any benefits whatsoever, and the people who say that there are benefits, it must be the industry who's told them to do it. It's head in the cloud stuff, really.
Yeah, and Brent, I would watch over the next year, over the next 2 years, how nicotine is talked about more by the WHO, because I think they've just started to talk about this because, it's a popular talking point. And we talked about this earlier in the week, is that so many physicians, so many doctors think that it's nicotine that causes cancer from smoking. We've heard in the US, there was a study, 60% of medical doctors heard a study today, I forget which country it was from, but 75% of those doctors think it's nicotine that causes the cancer. So I think the WHO is going to jump onto that and really use that as the springboard to obviously talk about pouches and other nicotine products, not just vaping.
Mm-hmm. I've got a little personal comment I'll make right before we go to interviews. It's going to be around that. Martin, I understand that the World Health Organization is about to undergo significant staff cuts. The WHO's 2026-2027 budget has a $1 billion shortfall, and to secure financial stability, the WHO is cutting around 2,400 jobs. That's like 28% reduction in headcount. What do you make of that?
Well, they can't even do that right. I don't know if you know that a lot of the staff are complaining because they're not cutting the big names at the top. They're cutting the low level staff, and there's some of the staff have come out and written articles and spoken to RegWatch and news articles like that, saying some anonymously because they don't want to get in trouble with the WHO, have said, why are they not getting rid of some of these highly paid people in Geneva? Why are they taking the jobs out of different countries where they do the stuff that's actually quite helpful? They're cutting all the low-level jobs and not the top ones. So there's a lot of concerns about that as well amongst their own staff. So they can't even cut costs properly.
Okay, well, that's a nightmare. It could actually not work out well for us, But David, tell us about the mainstream media at Good Cop 2.0. Did you attract any coverage?
We did attract some coverage, and the coverage was mainly negative. Surprise, surprise, right? Is that they are paid for and bought by Bloomberg. And I mean, listen, some of these companies actually, or media companies, actually receive money from Bloomberg. So let's make it straight. And also, there's just so much disinformation coming from the World Health Organization. And my concern is that the media sees the United Nations, and listen, the United Nations, the shine has kind of gone off of them, but people still hold them in some sort of regard. So they say, oh, well, if the United Nations, the World Health Organization, if they're saying something, it must be true. So we've had to do a lot of fact checking and really pushback. I mean, let's call for what it is, pushback. And they take personal attacks. They go after us personally for this. And again, it's always industry interference. And it's something that I've talked about. We are the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. The World Health Organization is funded by taxpayers. Why are we not allowed to ask these questions? And as far as industry is concerned, again, we talked about this too, is that this is saving lives. These products are saving lives. And at our last panel, we had people share just why they're involved in this issue. And almost all of them was because they are former smokers. We had Kurt from South Africa, and I hope I'm not betraying, any confidence or privacy here, but just how his family has been decimated by smoking. We hear, throughout the week that this is a very personal issue for folks. And that's what we're trying to get to the media, the mainstream media, is that this is a very personal issue for us. It's not personal to the WHO. This is totally bureaucratic and something they want to do. So it's frustrating that, we have to, break through the mainstream media.
So we're going to get to the Genie conversation in a second, but since that you brought up personal, I've got a bit of a personal thought to share regarding the WHO, FCTC, and Bloomberg-funded anti-nicotine orgs and their war on nicotine, specifically their contention that nicotine is harmful simply because it's addictive. This is an error. if an addiction causes no real harm, it's merely a dependence. Now, I smoked 25 years. The last 15 of those years, I smoked 2 packs a day, and it was killing me. And it also made me go broke. Now, in this case, with so much harm attached to my use of nicotine, it was a harmful addiction. But when I quit smoking via nicotine vapes, my addiction to nicotine became a dependence, as it was no longer harmful. This is textbook stuff here. And one last point, I'm personally disgusted and offended by the way they frame safer nicotine as an addiction. I was also an alcoholic. I drank heavily for 25 years. I quit in my early 40s. I've been sober for 13 years. Alcohol for me was an addiction that caused immense harm to me and those around me. It would have killed me. How is an addiction to alcohol or combustible tobacco anywhere near in the same ballpark as a nicotine pouch or a vape? They're trivializing real addiction.
Yeah, these things are fashionable, though. It's all to do with fashion. Remember, people like coffee. People here were drinking coffee all day. The coffee machine was going, and I was thinking, would it interfere with the sound? I don't drink tea or coffee, but I know people enjoy it. But people who drink coffee may not know that coffee was banned for 300 years. Currently, it's fashionable. But you've seen some early rumblings of people in the UK, public health, trying to talk about how caffeine drinks for kids, they're going to be banned in the UK. So you're getting that thing, the little rumbling of the nanny state coming after your coffee. So
Mission creep.
yeah, so you've got to beware. These things go in cycles. Who knows?
Yeah.
Now, David, so talk a little bit more, we were talking prior to coming on air about Jeannie Cameron's assessment of the countries.
Yeah, so the past 24, 48 hours, I've been thinking, where do we go from here? Well, we had a successful conference. We're having a successful conferences. What happens during the next 2 years? And thankfully, Jeannie Cameron really put it into context for me yesterday when she talked about these different tiers of countries and what they've said and the comments that they've made. For example, tier 1, New Zealand and St. Kitts and Nevis. St. Kitts and Nevis, they started this in Panama. They started this discussion about harm reduction. We know the New Zealand miracle that's happening, and I'm going to call it a miracle because this is happening and people are quitting smoking. And so this is tier 1. These guys are locked up. We're good. Then we have tier 2, Tajikistan. We have the Philippines, Guyana, and they're saying some really good things, but we need for them to take another step up on the rung. Tier 3, Australia. Need I say more? I mean, listen, they are so locked into who they are, what they're doing. So that's tier 3. Now, my goal is over the next 2 years is to take the tier 2 people and move them up to tier 1. And that's on us, Brent. That is on us as a community, is to communicate to them, whether it's op-eds, media appearances, personal visits, but really to talk about these issues. So these tier 2 countries in 2 years are tier 1. And guess what? There will be more chaos at the World Health Organization. There will be more gridlock if we have more tier 2 countries become tier 1. And I really think we will, because I think we've made amazing progress since Panama with other countries speaking out. And listen, these aren't big countries, right? We're talking about Guyana. But it's important to get our numbers and to build these numbers. And that's what personally I'm going to be doing with the Taxpayers Protection Alliance is Martin and I are going to get together and say, how do we reach out to these countries? How do we get them to the next tier so we can really move forward with the World Health Organization to stopping this nonsense?
Very smart, very smart. Okay, gentlemen, we're going to go to a clip and then our first interview. And see you back here at the end of the show.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thanks, Brent.
Dr. Bate, in October, you published FCTC, The Wrong Lessons Learned, How WHO's Tobacco Treaty Became a Template for Exclusionary Global Governance. What's the top-line message of that paper?
I think the key thing that people should understand from the research that I did that led to that paper is that the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control has become kind of the poster child of how you manage to avoid dissenting opinions, exclude voices that you don't agree with, either simplify or deny the existence of science that is inconvenient to the conclusion you want. And if, as has happened, I think that the anti-tobacco forces, which I think fought a good fight against the great dangers of smoking for decades, they pivoted over the last 15 years, 20 years, definitely over the last decade, from being anti-smoking to being anti-nicotine. And I think that the data do not bear out that that is a good policy. And so to maintain that position that nicotine itself is dangerous has required the denial of so much counter and sensible opinion that it's become a model that I think that others have used in the public health space. So that's the takeaway message from the paper.
Now, certainly, it seems that pharmaceutical-based nicotine is quite okay.
Sure. I mean, we can get on to the funding issue and who's funding what, and I think that does, that becomes important. But I think what's critical, if for my research, especially when I looked at COVID, is that the way that the WHO was able to ignore, deny, berate the people who came up with alternative points of view, theories that often were shown to be correct down the road, they followed, unfortunately, the way that the FCTC has operated, at least over the last 12, 15 years, and almost from inception, but definitely since like 2010.
It's interesting, Dr. Vape, when COVID hit, and we'd already been covering this issue for 5 years, I saw COVID's response to almost be an extension of the lying, the mendacity, the control kind of minded position that public health had toward smoking and then vaping and so forth. I actually saw COVID as a continuation, not as an aberration.
I think there's no doubt that there has always been a paternalistic streak, which is occasionally bordered on fascism in health policy. There is no doubt that, often from well-meaning positions, if you are a lung specialist and you see people with smoking injuries and lung cancers all the time, you're naturally going to be very hostile to cigarettes. Okay. If you imagine that writ large, and also physicians tend to be both very bright and quite arrogant. And so there is this, I would say that it's become quite natural for them to say, it doesn't really matter what makes sensible public policy. We're going to ban this because it's the right thing to do for health.
And joining us today to kick off our final interviews from Good Cop 2.0, I've had like 1 hour sleep, everybody, so my mouth is not working so well, is Jacob Greer. Greer is a U.S.-based journalist known for his sharp critiques of tobacco control and his fervent support for tobacco harm reduction. Jacob, great to see you again.
Brent, good to see you as well. And I'll tell you, I'm on like a 9-hour time difference here, so the jet lag is hitting me too, even if I got a little more sleep.
I'm in Vancouver, but I'm jet lagged because I've been having to do Geneva time all this week. Oh my God,
that's rough.
It's crazy. So look, I'd be remiss in not mentioning that you are the author of two great books, The New Prohibition and The Rediscovery of Tobacco, Smoking, Vaping, and Creative Destruction of the Cigarette. Tell us how it's been going in Geneva this week.
Well, I can tell you in Geneva itself, it's been lovely. It's sunny. We're starting to get a little snow. There's the Christmas market opened last night. It's fantastic. It's incredibly charming. I wish you were here. Down the street, a couple kilometers at the WHO meeting, we can only speculate how that's going. There's been some interesting developments for that and how they're responding to countries that are succeeding with harm reduction. And as Martin was talking about, we have a very opaque scenario and how things are going to go tomorrow. But here I can say on the plus side that Good Cop 2.0 has been fantastic. It's been really wonderful to meet so many people, and I've been really impressed by the sessions that we've gone through every day.
Yeah, tell us about that, because obviously we haven't been there. So, what's it like? Obviously, you did some speaking.
I did. I got to jump into one panel where I got to host a panel about tobacco harm reduction in North America, where we got to get a broad view of the United States, Mexico, and Canada and talk about developments there. And I wish we could say it was all going well. We actually had to talk a lot about the challenges of what our governments are doing wrong most of the time, but we also had some some optimistic takes about where we're seeing potential to fight back against that. And then I got to be on a panel as well, which is extremely relevant to my last book, The New Prohibition, which is about how some of the extremes in tobacco control are creating side effects related to criminal justice, most notably with illicit markets and the challenges of prohibition and everything that spills out from that.
Yeah, and that is definitely a major issue because, there's a lot of discussion about enforcement and bans and restrictions and so forth at COP11. The FTC, pretty much is calling for global bans, but they don't seem to be considering the consequences of these actions.
Yeah, and that's what's really striking. And obviously, I think this is the case for anyone who advocates prohibition, throughout history. They always think that it's going to work this time. Nobody goes into it expecting it to fail. But I do think that tobacco control in particular has failed to take into consideration all the unintended consequences that can come out from these policies. And I think there's several explanations for that. And one of them is just sort of this knee-jerk response to say that any of these arguments are just industry talking points, and anyone making them must be funded by the industry. And so that just becomes a shortcut to dismiss these and not take them seriously, even though they deserve to be taken seriously. And we don't have any connection to industry. And I think the other issue is that people who work in public health and who work in the WHO have a very technocratic view of these policies, where they think if they design them well, they will be implemented very smoothly. But just because they're experts in public health or experts in epidemiology, it doesn't make them experts in criminal justice. It doesn't make them experts in economics or how people might respond to these prohibitions taking effect. And we've seen that in multiple ways. I talk a lot about the United States and our state level flavored vape bans. And they're always presented as these are simply misdemeanors. They're not going to create any illicit market issues, and if they do, then it's just a fine for anyone who's selling them. And they play it off as a very minor issue. But these can obviously spin off in other ways. For example, state laws often, or across the board, pretty much always criminalize the sale of untaxed tobacco products, which by definition, these products that they're bringing in violation of flavor bans are going to be untaxed. And so in the act of selling these in any quantity, yes, you're committing a misdemeanor. That same person is also committing a felony that can be punished by up to 5 years in prison. And I recently wrote about the first case of this that I've been able to find in Massachusetts, which was a 62-year-old man who owned a shop who was selling flavored vapes in violation of the flavored vape ban, which again is a misdemeanor. But the police staked out his shop. They found him selling flavored vape from his car to avoid being seen doing it in the shop. And then he spent 6 months in jail. And it's just mind-boggling. One, that we're using police resources, to stake out a vape shop. Two, that we're putting someone behind bars in a cage for 6 months for selling these products that objectively could be saving a lot of lives. Whereas meanwhile, inside the store, if he was selling perfectly legal cigarettes that we know kill more than 7 million people every year, that's totally fine. And I think that demonstrates the wrong priorities that we have in tobacco control right now. And to take that further, this is bad enough, but we all talk about Australia as a counterexample,
Right.
of how this can go even more out of control, where the illicit market gets completely taking over the legal market. And we see not only a minor crime like selling a vape or not paying a tax, but very serious crimes like shootings and more than 100, if not 200, fire bombings and arsons by criminal gangs who are competing for the illegal market.
Yeah, I mean, it really does happen. The illegal market is a nasty, dirty market.
Yeah, and in the long view, I think that we will get this right, and this is what has always happened historically. If you go all the way back to King James in England, when tobacco first came to the island of Britain, he wrote in 1605 the Counterblasted Tobacco, one of history's most dramatic anti-tobacco tracts ever written. But within 20 years, he realized the prohibition wasn't working. People weren't listening to him, and he thought, well, it might be nice actually to have a royal monopoly on tobacco. And I think that is the eventual path that we will see, is that these products will become legitimate, but it's going to be a long uphill battle.
Now, are you concerned that the concept of harm reduction might be getting tainted by the World Health Organization's attack on nicotine?
I hope that doesn't happen, but no, I don't think that will. I think harm reduction has a lot of strength behind it. One of the questions that came up a lot during our conference this week, though, that I think is worth talking about, is that harm reduction is by nature a contextual argument. The case for harm reduction is always going to be dependent on the level of harm that already exists. So in countries that have a very high smoking rate, then obviously the potential for harm reduction is very high. And in countries that have very low smoking rates, there's going to be less potential for harm reduction. And if those of us who advocate harm reduction are right, then eventually smoking rates everywhere are going to be very low, and correspondingly, much of the harm will be low. And so then we do inescapably come to this position where we have to talk about what do we do now with people who vape or use nicotine pouches or any other products. And so there's really no escape from that more fundamental question of whether people have the liberty to use these or not.
The big question, I mean, you just mentioned epidemiology with regard to how WHO approaches these things. Is part of the problem maybe not even rooted in that? Because population level, by its definition, disregards individuals.
Yeah, and that's very frustrating too. And I often talk about coming back to this fundamental question of, can we really tell an individual, especially someone who previously smoked cigarettes or currently smokes cigarettes, that they don't have the right to access these products that are potentially life-saving to them? And I think we heard some really great testimony from people this week who have had that personal experience of being unable to quit smoking and struggling for years to do so and losing family members to it. And then the first time they try a vape or the second time they try a vape, they never go back. And so I think that always going back to the population level question is a challenge. But I also think it's coming around to our side because, in the past, we would always talk about the Swedish experience. And we called it the Swedish experience because it was really the only good example we had, where we had a country with long-term, relatively free access to reduced risk nicotine products. And I think one thing that's coming through a lot right now is that it's no longer just the Swedish experience. It's other Nordic countries. It's New Zealand. It's Japan. It's South Korea. We could go on. And so I think that is something that the WHO is eventually going to have to grapple with, that the Swedish experience is replicable. And you can't deny the success of countries that they're giving dirty ashtray awards to. I mean, I don't know how they can keep that contradiction going for much longer.
Well, they've certainly made an enemy, I hope, of New Zealand.
Yeah. Nobody wants to be the enemy of New Zealand.
No, nobody.
Yeah.
Well, Jacob,
they're really nice.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time here today, and enjoy the rest of your time in Geneva.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Great to talk to you, Brent.
You too. Bye-bye. Mark, you've just released a stellar two-part series on Medium. The first titled, What's Wrong with the WHO? The World Health Organization is spreading misinformation about e-cigarettes to the detriment of millions of people who could use them to quit smoking. And the second part is titled, Why is the WHO so wrong about e-cigarettes? Michael Bloomberg and his philanthropy are a malevolent influence on the World Health Organization, critics say. What is the World Health Organization's stance on vaping in your mind? And do you have any examples?
Well, it's not in my mind because it's all over their website. It's on their Twitter account. They have both spread unwarranted fear about the risks of e-cigarettes, and they discourage people from using e-cigarettes as a way of quitting smoking, even though there's really strong independent evidence that for many, many people, e-cigarettes have become the best way to quit smoking. It's also in a new bot, an AI-generated bot that you can go to online and ask questions. And the stance, and it's also in their policies, their advice, most importantly, to poor and middle-income countries around the world, where essentially they've given these countries the advice that they should entirely ban e-cigarettes. And they awarded to a health minister of India, which enacted a ban on e-cigarettes, their sort of highest award for leadership. So there's no ambiguity about their position on e-cigarettes. They're steadfastly opposed to it. And that's obviously a big problem because, as we've discussed, e-cigarettes are a very useful way for people to quit smoking combustible cigarettes. Respected organizations all around the world, including in countries like the US, which has largely been hostile to e-cigarettes, acknowledge that they are a safer way to consume nicotine than smoking. So fundamentally, the advice they give to other countries, they're terrible on e-cigarettes.
Well, also joining us today live from Geneva at Good Cop 2.0 is Clarice Vergino. Clarice is from Philippines, and she's a representative at CAPRA and has been involved in tobacco harm reduction since 2018. Clarice, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Well, what do you think of the events this week at Good Cop 2.0?
It's pretty refreshing because actually this is a 360 moment for me because I was also here in Geneva for COP. I think it was COP 8 back in 2018. That's when I started consumer advocacy. Having Good Cop 2.0, it's refreshing because it puts science, lived experience, and research, consumer voices at the center of it all, which actually that's how tobacco control should be, right? So this is pretty refreshing.
Wow. So do you notice a difference between the COP 11 and the COP 8?
We're still restricted from joining. We are still not included, so things are still the same. But I think in terms of the Philippines, there's a pretty big difference.
How do you mean? How is the Philippines different now?
Now because we already have a vape law, so compared to back in 2018, although vape and other tobacco harm reduction products are not illegal at the time, there's no regulation. So now we do have a regulation in place. And I think the speech made by our delegation, I know you've heard about Jeannie Cameron, right? She put us at tier 2. We are embracing tobacco harm reduction, but we are not very vocal about it. The speech given was very diplomatic.
Ah, yes. Well, that seems to be the case for a lot of those speeches. Tell us, so our viewers understand, what the state of the vape laws are in the Philippines.
Okay, it lapsed into law in 2022. Right now, there are still some rules and regulations that are being crafted and are supposed to be implemented. But these rules and regulations are crafted by regulating agencies. So, as consumer advocate for myself, I try to really check whether these department orders and rules and regulations do align with the vape law, because sometimes these rules and regulations tend to be even more prohibitive or restrictive compared to the vape law itself.
So is access to safer nicotine products in Philippines, is that easy? Like, are you allowed to have a vape? Can you walk down the street with a vape and use it?
Yes. In terms of that, yes, since we now have a vape law, it's allowed. But according to our law, we cannot just vape by like walking around and you vape around. No, no, you can't do that. In certain cities, they actually give you a ticket for that.
You get a ticket.
Yeah. Yes. It's the same with smoking, actually. You cannot just walk around while you're smoking. There are designated areas where you can do it.
So tell us what brought you into being an advocate for tobacco harm reduction in the first place.
When I went here in 2018, that was actually the birth of my consumer advocacy. I was invited mainly as a consumer only. And when I got here, I got exposed to the plight of a lot of consumers all around the world, not just in the Southeast Asian region. And I thought to myself that this is something that I can stand for. This movement is something that I can defend, especially because I have a law degree. So this is something quite close to my heart.
Yeah, what I did want to ask you, sorry about that. I did want to ask you in terms of your law degree, have you been able to deploy your law degree in any way?
Yes, very much so, because a lot of the consumer advocacy work that I do also is connected to the policies that are being crafted by the government. So because of my law degree, I do know which should be and should not be included in these rules and regulations.
So what do you think are the biggest challenges to, forging a friendlier path for safer nicotine products in the Philippines?
I've mentioned this actually in the panel discussions that I was a part in. The biggest challenge really is the disinformation in the Philippines because, as you know, a lot of Filipinos are into social media. And social media is a good thing, but it can also be used to take advantage of people. And it could be used to proliferate fake news. And fake news is very, very rampant in my country. So I think that's a really big challenge for us because the Philippines is a culture-centric country. And it's not easy to convince people to believe in the science, even though you show them the data, because they tend to believe more what they see on their screens.
They tend to see more believe more what they see on
Yeah.
their screens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's the old saying. I mean, that's not new. People used to believe what was printed in a newspaper, and that wasn't necessarily any more truthful.
But the thing is, because in the Philippines, we have doctors who are social media influencers and content creators. Yeah, we have that. Um, it's funny, I know, for other people, it sounds funny, but in the Philippines, we do have those. And because of the fact that we are culture centric, we put so much belief in doctors and lawyers and other licensed professionals. So if they spew fake news, if they don't show you the real data, and this content gets to the hands of people who are not really aware of what tobacco harm reduction is, then that's a challenge for us.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, Clarice, thank you so much for joining us today and enjoy the last bit of your time in Geneva.
Thank you.
So start by telling us what's going on right now.
It seems like once a year, YouTube will sweep through a lot of the vape content on YouTube. It always kind of goes in line with each other. Someone will get a strike, and then someone else will get a strike, and then someone else will get a warning. And we all kind of know, oh, okay, YouTube is doing a yearly sweep through of our channels. And we usually survive. There was 1 year that I did get 3 full strikes and had to escalate it to YouTube to get, on Twitter X to get my channel back. But this kind of happens every year. And I got a warning on October 27th, and I thought, okay, here we go. This is going to be a thing. And before you know it, over the course of the next 5 days, it was something like 15, 16 videos removed. In and amongst all of this, I got 2 strikes. I got some appeals. I got some appeals rejected. I got videos taken down for medical misinformation, which is a brand new thing. And I think this all stems from YouTube using their Gemini AI as a moderator to moderate videos. And I don't know that it's going very well.
So that's interesting. There's been other creators and people we work with, like GFN, have had a couple of videos receive similar treatment, and they've been like scientific interviews, with experts,
Sure.
worldwide experts
Yeah.
on nicotine. And it seems like a targeting of nicotine.
It definitely does feel like a targeting of nicotine. The video that I had taken down for medical misinformation was a video that I did about the NIH MIND study, Vanderbilt University. NIH has been funding this study to the tune of millions of dollars to see if nicotine dosing can help ameliorate Alzheimer's symptoms and help with memory improvement. And this is a big government-funded study that I did a video on that got taken down for medical misinformation. And the reason that YouTube said it was medical misinformation is I didn't properly warn about the potential health dangers of nicotine in this video. I was only talking about how nicotine could probably improve your memory. And that supposedly is medical misinformation.
That is big news. Did you catch that, Jeffrey?
What?
Of just what was Grim Green was saying.
Oh, about the YouTube thing? Yeah. That's something that we have been kind of cautious about and a little scared because when it comes to YouTube channels, obviously they're a big part of this because sometimes through regular media, you don't get some sort of news or highlights or at least relevant information that is happening on the field, right? So we kind of for us it's kind of relevant to be able to communicate within each other. I know that there's relevant consumer organizations and people in advocacy and people in research and science and everything that kind of group together through social media to disclose a lot of information of a lot of things that are happening at the moment. So it's really relevant to be able to interact with each other. And that's YouTube is one of the ways, of course.
Totally. So we jumped right into our interview. Of course, you're Jeffrey Zamora, our favorite advocate from Latin America. So talk to us a little bit about what you think COP11, like what do you think might be going on behind the scenes?
Well, with so much censorship, who knows, right? Besides bullying with the Dirty Ashtrays Award and a lot of aggressiveness, perhaps, who knows what's going on there? What I'm a little, something that gets me into reflection is how much bullying are the delegates actually suffering? Because, for example, we know that 7 countries, as you were speaking with David and Martin about, 7 countries positioned themselves on their testimonies or the opening statement that they give, in favor of harm reduction, right? And then after that, they're suffering a lot of bullying, a lot of, I don't know, or pushing, right, to try to change what they actually think. And it is kind of I don't know, if something like a parallel narrative where something really strange what's going on. Because, for example, if you see what happened on the United Nations Drug and Crime 68 session, right, where a coalition of countries actually requests the United Nations to make an independent review and kind of moving towards harm reduction, right? And you now see that there's another UN body that actually is saying that the harm reduction principle, it's actually an industry thing, especially for us that we know where how it began, right? How it began on forums, on user forums, trying to mod an e-cig that it was made by a pharmaceutical Honlik, it was like a pharmaceutical
Right.
counselor, yeah, something, right? He developed this product just to help him and his father move away from cigarettes. So it's kind of difficult to get an idea of how this is actually the real life. This is not a movie.
Oh yeah, it's not a movie, no.
Yeah,
And I mean, I can recall in 2019, 2020, just the internal kind of discussion that people in the vaping community had to decide whether or not if tobacco harm reduction was the right way to discuss what it is we're advocating for. So it's not, and so certainly there wasn't some big tobacco company that came down and dropped it on our lap. I mean, it was a discussion.
And like many people that you have on the show before, they kind of give us the whole timeline of the people that have been involved, right? And how actually the industry or the big tobacco industry actually got involved, like, I don't know, 12 years after it started, So it was a lot of independent manufacturers and innovators working their way out, trying to see what actually the people wanted and what helped people to kind of put away the cigarettes and start using these safer alternatives. Then years after, even though the weed did have some sort of evidence, years after it was solidified with the Cochrane review, with the eighth review from the Public Health England, or what is called the Office of Health and Disparities from the UK, and the NHS, and then we have the New Zealand report, and then we have so much science, you know, the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, and a bunch of bodies saying, you know, yeah, it is reducing harm if you're switching from cigarettes to these safer alternatives. So it's a different reality. It's an alternative reality where we're living. And, you know, for example, one of the things that kind of I find more ironic, it's that, for example, this idea of saying that there's no problem with illicit trade, and then they have 1 week later a conference about illicit trade. The WHO. So are they doing something that is not relevant or they don't believe in? You know, it is ironic.
Yeah, it's mixed up. It's upside down world. There's no doubt. We know that in Latin America, you do a lot of bridging between, you know, regions and stuff because of the advocacy, nature of the advocacy. You're from Costa Rica, but you also have a good beat on what's been going on in Mexico. What's been the aftermath of the constitutional amendment that was done?
There's a lot of stuff to be seen yet, right? We know that this happened with the Constitution in Mexico, that they kind of tried to ban it on a constitutional level. Whatsoever the wording of how it was put itself, it requires some guidelines or national guidelines to be sure how deep it's gonna go. So at this present time, we are kind of on waiting. There's a lot of people there that are, you know, much more aware of the whole situation and how different one word to the other, you know, sanction to ban, it is there on legal terms, right? But the whole idea is that at this present time, everything it's gray. Everything is gray. We don't know if it is white, if it is black. At this present time, what we do know is that unfortunately there's a huge illicit market, and as you will know, Brent, the biggest markets when it comes to Latin American countries, it's Mexico and Brazil, and both of them are banning these products. So I think that provision doesn't work.
Well, there you go. And that's a perfect way to put a cap on it. Jeffrey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Brent. See you later.
So, Nick, the WHO, do you think organizations like the WHO or Bloomberg-funded anti-vaping NGOs are influencing platforms like YouTube to police nicotine information?
I wouldn't put it past them. And it really does feel like that. Everything that YouTube says to me about nicotine or why my videos are taken down happen to fall in line perfectly with the things that World Health and more specifically Mike Bloomberg has to say about vaping.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to not imagine that there is some coordination around what they consider misinformation.
Yeah, well, what they consider misinformation, what anybody considers misinformation, the hardest part is objective truth always exists. And it doesn't matter what mouth it's coming out of, objective truth always exists. If I walk up on a street and there's a 6 painted on the ground, I go, oh, look, it's a 6. And someone approaching from the other direction goes, no, that's a 9. You're both wrong and you're both right, but the person who drew it knows the truth. Objective truth still exists, and it seems like the World Health Organization doesn't want people to know that objective truth still exists. They want to believe the messaging that all tobacco is on the same level and that all tobacco is bad. And that is ultimately going to cost people their lives.
Yes, and what we've seen quite a bit is that the WHO has spent some time now over the past several years communicating a narrative that basically says vaping is maybe even worse than smoking.
I can't think of a more irresponsible message for the World Health Organization to be putting out into the public sphere marketplace of ideas. That is wildly irresponsible. Wildly irresponsible. I don't know how. Why is World Health Organization making sure that the only nicotine we can get is from combustible cigarettes? Is that their mission? Because that's what their mission seems to have become, is that the only place any of us can get nicotine is from the most lethal source possible. Those will stay on the market. Any competition to those, no, we can't have that. That's a ploy from Big Tobacco.
And now we bring the fire. How's it going, Dr. Farsalinos? Just got to make sure you can hear me. Dr. Farsalinos, can you hear me?
Now I can hear you, yes.
No, you can't. Sorry, I'll have to fix that in editing. Okay, so let's edit point here. And now it's time to bring the fire. Dr. Farsalinos, how's it going?
Hi, Brent. Very nice talking to you once again.
Yeah, you too. So you're a physician, a research associate at the University of Patra and the University of West Attica in Greece, and one of the best-known advocates for the science on vaping. Tell us, what do you think of COP11?
I would say of harm reduction in general. COP11. I think that the last few COP11s are a waste of time and resources. Why? Because there is no advancement being made in anything concerning smoking or harm reduction. We're seeing the same ideological opposition to tobacco harm reduction, and in fact, tobacco harm reduction has been the main target of the COP meetings and the FCTC in general. And what I see is that there is now stronger opposition. Over time, we see stronger opposition from some member states. And the reason for that, I think that is that the WHO FCTC have escalated their fanatism against tobacco harm reduction to the point that it makes even less sense than it did in the past few years. And the reason is very simple. There is growing evidence over time on the prospects, the positive prospects for public health of tobacco harm reduction products. There's a growing list of different products which help a large number of smokers with very diverse and unique personal needs. And that's a very good thing, because the more choices you have, the more chance of convincing and helping more smokers to make the switch. So instead of endorsing this approach and using an evidence-based pathway into giving proper recommendations and advice and guidance to the member states, they follow an ideologically opposed prohibitive agenda, which is becoming more aggressive over time, which unfortunately for them is now even more obvious that it goes against science. It also now not only goes against science, but it goes against real world examples. I can't think of any country which followed a prohibitive pathway that had any success in accelerating the smoking decline. Every country that has been successfully combating smoking and accelerated the decline in the smoking rates in the population has done it with the help of harm reduction. Let's start with Sweden, let's move on to the UK, let's move to New Zealand. So every country which has been successful, Sweden is the only smoke-free country in Europe. They managed it only because of harm reduction. They already experience public health benefits in terms of population health, the lowest death rates from smoking-related cardiovascular disease, lung cancer, cancer in other organs. They've done it only because of THR, snus, nicotine pouches, but also electronic cigarettes. And when you look at smoking rates versus nicotine use rates, comparing Sweden with the rest of the EU, it's something astonishing. The nicotine use rate in Sweden is identical to the average of the rest of the European Union. It's 24 versus 22.9%, which statistically doesn't have any difference. But when you look at the source of nicotine intake, this is where the big difference is coming from, and this is what matters, that Sweden has as a main source of nicotine intake for the population snus, pouches, and other harm reduction products. In the rest of the EU, it's smoking. And that creates the big public health difference in the benefits in Sweden versus the harms in the rest of the EU. When you see a very respectable organization like the WHO not following the evidence and the real world now data that we have on a population level, then member states start being suspicious about what's going on. It becomes more like a religious ideological battle instead of an evidence-based approach in promoting public health. And I think that that's why the FCTC is paying the price. I think that the last 2 or 3 meetings, they have been, I must say, useless, because there is nothing new came out in terms of combating smoking. It has always been about harm reduction. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. We see countries receiving awards for disastrous policies. For example, India. India is a monopoly for tobacco, cigarettes, and all the other oral, smokeless, harmful tobacco products that are sold and are traditionally being used in India. And we know that India, for example, has the number one is the number one country in the rates of oral cancer. Why? Because of the use of extremely toxic and harmful oral smokeless tobacco products. And when a few years back, a company tried to sell Scandinavian snus, which we know does not increase the risk of oral cancer at all, they got banned. The government banned the sales of a much safer alternative for the large number of millions of people who are using toxic oral smokeless tobacco products.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Well,
but they received an award.
Right.
Mexico received an award this year. Mexico has created a huge illicit black market trade of vaping products in the hands of the drug cartels, and they're receiving awards from the WHO. Well, these things don't make sense, and I think that more member states and more delegates are starting to realize that.
When we last spoke in person at the Global Forum on Nicotine in Warsaw, you brought to our attention this Twitter X post. I'm going to just play it. I'm not certain my mics are going to still work here. Hold on. Let's just give it a try. Oh, there you go. You can see that. So the World Health Organization put this out. It was a tweet that says, "What looks cute, smells good, but is designed to kill? A vape." You're the one that brought that to my attention. Shocking.
And it's a typical case of disinformation, and we need to differentiate misinformation from disinformation. This is a typical case of disinformation, because they know pretty well that vapes, first of all, were not even created by the tobacco industry. They definitely were not designed to kill. There are I don't know if you're aware, but a few years back, I gave a presentation at GFN, and I was presenting the history of these products. And there were patents, and you can find it in Google Patents, of devices that look like e-cigarettes, but were designed to inhale medications from the 1930s. From the 1930s, wow. So battery devices with the wicking and coil system and a tank, which were at that time designed to be used for inhaling, aerosolizing and inhaling medications. And eventually it was those designs that evolved into becoming electronic cigarettes. And we know very well that since the beginning, the e-cigarette was designed to avoid combustion. And everyone, you don't even need to be an expert, understands that combustion is the main source of harm coming from smoking. So avoiding combustion can in no way have comparable risks to smoking. Everyone knows that. So statements like this are a typical case and a typical definition of disinformation.
Man, it's pretty disappointing to see the global public health body do that.
It's pretty disappointing, and it is destroying the reputation of an organization like the WHO, a reputation which is, and an organization which is supposed to use evidence to promote public health. Unfortunately, all the arguments are now based on ideology. And as I said, the more extremist they become, because I consider this an extremist approach, the more extremist they become, the more reactions we're going to see from delegates and from countries. And that's why during this COP, we've seen more countries reacting to these policy recommendations which are not based on evidence compared to the previous COP in Panama a couple of years back. And I think that if they follow this path of ignoring evidence, I think there's going to be more opposition. You know, it's completely paradoxical and a very unfortunate irony that the more evidence that we have and over the years which fully support our initial estimations about the public health prospects of harm reduction products, the more misinformation and disinformation is communicated, and the more people, society, and particularly smokers, have serious and very strong misperceptions about these products. And that's really sad, because this literally prevents smokers from making informed decisions. They make misinformed decisions, and the decision that they're making is to continue to smoke because they don't think that these products represent a valid alternative to improve their health. And that's very wrong. All the evidence is showing the exact opposite.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you for your perspective, Dr. Farsalinos, and enjoy the rest of your time in Geneva.
Thank you very much, Brent. Thank you.
Well, gentlemen, are you already writing the promo for the next COP?
Yes, and you're going to be involved.
Well,
So
excellent. I'd be
we're-
happy
we're
to.
ready.
So fill us in, guys. What do we take away here?
Go ahead, Martin.
Well, we had some great panels. We had some brilliant conversations. I was particularly pleased with Jeannie Cameron's panel analysing the statements, because it brought home to us that there was more opposition this time. We kind of got a sense of that, but I know on the first day there wasn't too much. It was pretty thin gruel, if you like. But the second day, all these statements came out of the woodwork, and Jeannie just did brilliantly to watch them all. Firstly, I mean, it's no mean task on its own, but to somehow characterize them into tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 as she did was just brilliant. And it's great to see it analysed, and so we can see the sort of maybe a little bit of progress happening towards harm reduction in the world.
And Brent, let me take a bigger picture on this. And I tend to be a very sentimental guy. And I was thinking about a poem last night, and this is by Robert Frost, Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. And I think about that with this fight, with us having COP 2.0, 3.0, for wherever it's going to be. And yes, we all have miles to go before we sleep, because the job is not done. We had a very successful conference, but we have a lot of work to do. And that poem, that part of that poem resonates and rings in my brain.
Well, that is nice to end things with a little Robert Frost. That's great. Well, gentlemen, thank you so very much for a great week. And that is it for this special edition of RegWatch Live. Before you head off, please hit subscribe down below on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and don't forget to follow us on X. For RegulatorWatch.com, I'm Brent Stafford. Guys, that was excellent. That was great. Perfect. All right, enjoy your beers.